Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and welcome to another zero point 0.5 episode. And joining me today is Kareem the Dream, our resident independent researcher.
Hey, she got it right. Yes, perfect.
So how are you going today, mate?
Good, man. Good. I did some independent research uh, before coming on this podcast because the Fermi paradox happens to be something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I'm
Okay.
a huge science fiction fan.
hmm
Uh, and what I didn't realize until you sent through the prep materials for this podcast was how much this maps onto um, Marxian ways of thinking and the social systems and the great filter and I kind of suspected some of it, but I didn't understand how deep the rabbit hole goes. Um,
Mm.
that being said, I am looking forward to pushing back on some of it and having some productive debate around what it's all about and yeah,
Yeah.
what this great filter is. So
Yeah, I would say rather than the Fermi paradox, definitely the great filter. That's probably where the Marxian thought kind
yeah,
of crosses over. I
uh,
but like by all means, we probably should cover
the
the Fermi
definition.
paradox for yeah the Fermi
Yeah,
paradox first,
yeah,
and then
and the
move
great
on to
filter.
and then move on to the great filter
Uh,
because like one of the prime reasons why I wanted to discuss this today is uh, earlier this year I did go and go to a Cox talk, and he was actually discussing the Fermi paradox and the great filter, and I thought, hey, this would be
mm,
a great thing to discuss on the pod. It just so happens that I decided to um, I decided to mess around and say like,
find
hey,
out.
does this kind of
Yeah,
link quite well to revolutionary thought? And
yeah,
it was like, not really the Fermi paradox, but definitely the Great Filter. And then I was
yeah,
like, oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that from
yeah, yeah.
A Marxist
Okay.
lens,
So were you
but
talking to that AI when were you talking to the AI and checking this out? Was it or
yeah, and like when it made its argument, I was like, yeah, I could definitely see that in the capitalist crisis, and also the cycle of the cyclical nature of crisis, and whether the Great Filter plays a part in that.
mm,
But anyway, we're probably getting ahead of
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, we are
Um,
definitions.
Yeah, so I thought since you've been so interested in this for so
Yeah.
long, maybe for the Great Filter and the Fermi Paradox, you could provide the definition. So,
Okay. All right.
as an independent researcher,
As an
Kareem,
independent without my trusty AI handy at the moment, so this will be strictly off the top of my head. Um, Fermi paradox the is basically the idea that in terms of statistical probabilities of life being out there in the universe, we have what is it between like 100 billion and a trillion stars in our galaxy alone.
yeah,
So
with the Milky Way, yeah, yeah.
so when you think about how many habitable planets there could be within our galaxy alone, let alone how many galaxies there are in the universe, the odds of there being life out there apart from us, or on other planets, apart from Earth, is quite high. But when we go looking for it, we don't. We haven't found any evidence of life anywhere other than on Earth. So it's this paradox between the statistical probability being so high, but us having
Mm,
absolutely zero evidence for it. So that's the Fermi paradox. Um, the great filter is proposed as a solution to the Fermi paradox, in that between between life existing outside of Earth and an alien civilization being able to either make contact with us or becoming spacefaring or being able to exhibit any type of sign that we could pick up on that, hey, we're out here. We're not the only ones. We're looking
Mm,
for other civilizations too. Um, there could be a whole bunch or there could be some type of filter which prevents some civilizations, some sufficiently advanced civilization, from actually being able to undertake the necessary actions to make contact with other civilizations.
mm,
So there's something that filters out life before we get a chance to make contact with it, and that's the explanation for the Fermi paradox. Now, what that filter is
mm,
up for debate. Where exactly in the evolutionary cycle or what it constitutes is the source of endless debate. And as I learned in the process of preparing for this podcast, there are some social theories of 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 uh, of what the great filter is.
mm.
Um, but I'm sure we'll get stuck into that. So how does that map onto your understanding of?
Oh no, like that's pretty spot on. The probably the only extra thing I would add to that definition is the subcategories with the great filter of the spectrum of the pessimistic side of the great filter as well as the optimistic side of
Mm,
of the great filter. So with the great filter, if you're much more on the optimist end of it, you would say, well, the filter is in front of us, where we as an advanced species, we have gone to a certain point, but the ability to, um, I guess, spacefare through the universe and contact other alien life forms, that is ahead of us. And that is ahead of us. So we just need to keep on working technology
yay,
wise and
science.
all. Sorry?
Yay, science.
Yeah. We just need to science the shit out of it
Yeah,
to
basically.
to to co-opt a phrase from The Martian. We just need to science the shit out of it, and
Yeah,
then we'll eventually, yeah, we'll eventually get there and become seafaring folk. But
yeah,
then there's the other side of the pendulum, which is the pessimistic side. That because that's the whole thing about the great filter is it's not only it's not only, hey, do we have the technology to spacefair? It's also like a like it has social science aspects to it, where it maps on it maps on how civilizations rise and fall. So the
yeah,
pessimistic side of things is that we're actually past the filter. We are almost stuck in a loop, and
yeah,
maybe this is where the Marxist lens comes into things. We're kind of stuck in a loop, and it's almost impossible for us to get out of this loop. So the ability to, I don't know, take the superordinate goal of becoming seafaring folk, that is actually behind us. We've passed that opportunity of the great filter, and it's impossible for us to become seafaring folk, because
yeah.
if we were going to do it, we would have already done it.
Yeah, yeah. Look, few things I want to push back on there. So let's. How about we set up the debate, and
I'm
then
not saying I subscribe to the pessimistic one,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
but
get that.
it's the argument is that we're kind
It's
of
inevitable
stuck in
and
our ways, if you
right.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I buy the argument. Like it's a reasonable argument to make. I guess what I want to do is I want to spend time on both sides of the debate, and then I'd be hoping to spend some time outside of the debate, from a bird's eye perspective, if that's
Mm.
okay with you.
Yeah,
We'll
go for it.
set it up. I'm sure we'll ignore what we do and just go with the flow anyway. but like this is what I'm hoping to cover. So
Mm,
I think probably one of the most important things that I'd want to frame up front is uh, two things basically. Um, from an evolutionary perspective, um, now when we talk about what alien civilization might look like, there is this innate tendency for us to project humanoid type of qualities onto what alien intelligence might look like, what it might be capable of, how it might function, that sort of thing. Perfectly normal, perfectly natural. It's more of a function of the limits of our imagination
mm,
than it is an actual reality or an actual constraint on the possibilities of life out there.
mm,
Now, it's also entirely possible that there is a whole bunch of life out there in the universe, um, but none of it has been able to cross the great filter and actually make contact with us. Or some would say it's a function of intelligence, um,
mm,
being the reason why the reason why they haven't been able to cross the great filter. I,
mm,
I, I'd make the argument that intelligence, as we know it, isn't as easy to define and could take on very various forms if we look at the totality of species on planet Earth. So,
mm.
when we look at how species operate, and their connection with the environment, their connection with other organisms, the
Yeah.
ecosystems that they create, like what we see in terms of evolution happening on that level is probably more likely to be what we would witness in terms of similar dynamics on an alien planet, as opposed
Mm,
to humans rising to one civilization rising to the top, dominating the shit out of the entire planet, exploiting resources,
mm.
having the same sort of social dysfunctions that we do. These are all human projections of
Yeah.
what intelligence might look like for an alien civilization. They're not actual constraints on what might actually happen.
Well,
So
even like to bring up some of the talking points of both the Fermi paradox as well as the Great Filter is that uh, like with the Fermi paradox, it says that okay, the hypothesis of yes, there's infinite planets out there, not only within our solar system, not even within our galaxy, but also within all the various stars that are happening. But what we've observed, even within our galaxy, is that oh, sure, there are planets out there that can. Can produce they can be habitable planets, but
yeah,
the most likely candidate that produces life on that planet is, microscopic. It's microscopic. It's basically bacterial or something like that.
yeah,
We haven't, based on what we've viewed, we haven't seen other complex life forms out there.
yeah,
But then again, this is where the great filter comes in because there can be um, there can be on the pessimistic side of things. There's the zoo hypothesis where the aliens are so it's very X-filey, but like
yeah,
the aliens are out there, but they are just seeing what they're doing. They're tracking what we're doing, and they're just waiting for us to come to a certain technological advancement before they come in peace.
hey,
So there's that side of the things, and then that swings to the other side of the pendulum where well, it's just simply that yeah, of course we can make it to the moon. We've sent probes to Uh, we've sent probes to Mars and all the various other planets within our solar system, but we haven't untapped, like, just to use, Project Hail Mary as a recent from a
Yeah.
recent
Did you read
science.
it or watch it?
I've watched it. It's really good, but
Yeah, yeah. I read the book.
but
Amazing book. Yeah,
yeah, but I guess to use that as an example, we haven't uncovered astrophage, where
yeah,
we
yeah,
can travel to different galaxies and all of that.
yeah.
So because we
Propulsion.
haven't untapped that technology, that's the reason why we haven't passed through the filter.
So let me. I'll backtrack a little bit on the X Files kind of thing you were talking about because it probably deserves a very brief mention, only because I got stuck into three body problem, which really
Yes.
has spurred fueled a lot of my interest in science fiction. And another book I was reading was Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which
Right.
got me thinking very differently about what the possibilities are for alien life forms and what they might look like, and what symbiotic life actually looks like. But the reason why the three body problem is relevant is because the second book in that series, The Dark Forest, it proposes a theory that there are other alien civilizations out there, but because it's so dangerous for anybody to stick their head up and say, "Hello, I'm over here," for risk of getting annihilated by a more superior civilization, everybody chooses to stay quiet. That's one sort of it's a game theoretic perspective on 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 the Fermi paradox, basically. Um,
Uh,
I don't
I would
really.
say that that's probably more on the side of the pessimistic view of
I
things.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
I don't personally subscribe to it. I thought it was a fascinating exploration of it in Three Body Problem and the Dark Forest. So if anybody gets a
Mm.
chance to check that out, totally worth checking out. Now the other thing that that series did differently was it got me thinking on actually the combination of those two books got me thinking on a different level about the Fermi paradox altogether. Now, the first one is in terms of time scales. So I'm going to sort of propose my framing of the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter and why it exists. Because when you look at it, so this is my understanding. The universe is, I believe, it's 13 or 14 billion years old.
Hmm.
Now, Earth, I again, I believe, is about 4 billion years old.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how old the solar system is, and I'm not sure how old life on Earth is, but life on Earth happened sometime after Earth as a planet existed. So there was a time lag, but the reason I'm saying this is there's a time lag between the start of the universe, the existence of our habitable planet, the planet actually becoming habitable, life appearing on the planet on a habitable planet,
Mm.
that life evolving into what would eventually become humanity, and there's a whole bunch of steps in between the when life first appears and and all the twists and turns that it has to take in order for us as humans to emerge as intelligent beings who have basically conquered the planet
Mm.
and proliferated globally and like not mastered technology but learned how to use it way better than all the other species.
Mm.
So there's time lags between all of this stuff. Now, one prospect for the great filter that I'm putting forward is the idea that the life of a star is is finite. Like it doesn't exist
Mm.
forever. So as many stars as there are in the universe, they will go through a cycle and they will eventually die. They'll either become a supernova, or they'll turn into a black hole. So we know that stars die, which means that the planets that revolve around those stars cease to become habitable, basically,
Mm.
because there's no energy source for them to live off. There's no, like, imagine if our sun went out, we'd be fucked, basically.
Mm.
So
Mm. Mm.
now our sun will eventually go out. Yeah, what will happen is over time it will gradually expand. It will turn into a red dwarf,
Mm.
and what will happen is, like, at the moment we live in what's called a Goldilocks zone in terms of distance away from the sun. So
Mm.
what makes our planet habitable is we've got water, and it's not too hot, but it's not too cold. It's about the right temperature for us for life to exist.
Mm.
As the sun expands, what will happen is that Goldilocks zone will actually change.
Yeah.
So we will start to get closer to the sun, and the temperature on Earth will go up, and eventually reach a point where it's not actually habitable to be on Earth anymore. Now,
Mm.
the same is also true for any civilization on any planet. Any
Mm.
organism on any planet faces exactly the same challenge. Yeah.
Mm.
So to me, the great filter is, all right, there's the delay between life first appearing on a planet
Mm.
and the filter of you have to find a way to get off that planet before the Goldilocks zone changes.
Mm.
And then over and above that, you don't have to just find a way to become interplanetary. You have to find a way to become interstellar before that sun dies, before
Mm.
that star dies altogether. So that's your window of intelligence. Basically, that's what I'm calling it. So
Mm.
during that window, you have to evolve from theoretically a single-celled organism all
Mm.
the way up to being able to get off your rock and go to the next planet. And that only buys you a bit of extra time, because getting to the next planet is way easier than getting to the next star. And if you'll indulge me a little bit longer on this, because
Mm.
it's actually really important. Um, the distances between planets and the distances between stars um, are, are fucking huge, basically.
Mm.
Like, it gets underestimated all the time when we think about space travel. Yeah, like, these are not easy challenges to solve. Getting getting from Earth to Mars alone is a significant engineering challenge. My understanding is at this stage it'd take months for us to get there. We haven't quite figured out, like, propulsion systems, or like how to actually work it out. Like, just like we figured out how to send like rovers to Mars and stuff, but in terms of getting a human there and back, we haven't figured that out yet.
Mm.
Um, why? Because it's an incredibly difficult challenge on multiple levels, like engineering, physics. Actually, I think the physics is pretty much solved, but the distances between planets are genuinely, like, big, huge. And even if
Mm.
we figure out Mars, figuring it out to Jupiter or beyond that, like, absolute nightmare stuff to work with. Now, when we're talking about the distances between stars, so not becoming interplanetary, becoming interstellar, the closest star to our sun is 4.24 light years away. Light years.
Mm.
Now, what that means is if we were traveling at the speed of light, which is the theoretical maximum that any object can travel in the universe, like, you can't go faster than the speed of light,
Yeah.
basically. Going at that speed, it would take four years. from our perspective, theory of relativity would actually take a little bit less if you're the person traveling, but won't go into
Mm.
that. 4 years. Like, let's just say 4 years. So between us and the next system, you got to figure out how to keep a human alive in space for 4 years. Like how to, where does the food come from? Like how long is it going to be, like spending in propulsion? It's like a genuinely difficult challenge on multiple levels to figure out. And this is assuming you can even get to light speed. Getting to a fraction of light speed, like getting to 10% or 5% of light speed, is an engineering nightmare as it is. Like
Yeah, that was the thing I was about to ask you. Is I don't think we've solved light travel, so I think it would take us much more time than 4 years.
yeah. When I was doing prep for this episode, I think we've gotten to 0.1% of light speed travel for a fusion probe. So that's not a manned vehicle. That's an unmanned like spacecraft.
Mm.
And so these things are really light. So the lighter something is, the easier it is to propel it. But then like rocket fuel, it's. I've got a
Oh,
I
we.
can show you later if you're interested. I did up an infographic in Notebook LM around like propulsion technologies for interstellar travel and interplanetary travel. So I've got an infographic which I can share if you want. It just talks about how we've either got to figure out the engineering challenge for interstellar travel and like the sequence of technological breakthroughs that it would take for us to actually be able to pull off interstellar travel, versus if we figure out something like how to manipulate physics, how to walk through wormholes, how to do like warp drives and solve this light speed problem, which like isn't sort of incremental. It's entirely possible that the physics doesn't let us do it anyway. We'd have to spend the time researching it. We could pour millions of dollars into this thing only to find out physics doesn't, just says no. Nature just says no. You're not allowed to do that. That's not how nature works.
Right.
So like, but you've got to spend the money to actually figure that out. There's no sure bets on it. That's why it's I think it's hard to attract investment funding for that. Whereas propulsion technologies are a bit more certain. You can incrementally improve propulsion. You can get more efficient rockets. You can invest in fusion drives.
Mhm.
Like there's different. You can get astrophage if you. No, we can't get astrophage. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well, but I think that's the thing about Project Hail Mary
mm,
that yeah, this could be a good segue to at least the Marxian interpretation of things. Is
yeah,
that the at least the with the great filter with astrophage and what Ryan Gosling's character finds. I keep completely forgotten the name of the main character. Is it
the
Chris? Dr. Chris
yeah,
or
I read it ages ago. I forget, man.
no, no, no. Okay, well, basically Ryan Gosling's character.
Yeah, yeah,
He like him discovering astrophage and him, uh, sciencing the shit out of who what he was
yeah,
trying to achieve. That superordinate goal. Well, Earth was under threat. They obviously that. Whatever that light distortion thing was,
yeah,
that was blocking the sun
yeah. So the
and
sun was
prevent.
going to die, and they had to do something about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So,
Like that. At least the certain parts of the Great Filter was shoehorned where everyone came together because it's like, hey, if we don't solve this problem, we're all going to
we all
die,
died. Yeah, yeah,
and at least the uh, at least with our current system, everything was kind of put to the side because it's like, hey, we either solve this problem or we die. So
Yeah,
I'm sure for people that's a great motivator, and also
look,
all of the scientists and
you
probably
think
all of the
that
governments. Sorry, sorry.
you would think that existential risk would be a great motivator for
Yes, yeah.
people to actually do something about it. Um, but like as I was, again in the podcast prep, the one of the paper you sent through on anarchy, technology, and self destruct
Mm,
was talking a bit about how like capitalism doesn't really lend itself well to like solving existential risks. Like we can take climate change for example,
yep.
as the perfect example. But even if I go back to like my sort of window of intelligence hypothesis, where like we know the sun is eventually going to die. That's an existential risk to us. It's pretty
Mm,
far away. We don't know how to like markets don't know how to price risk that's that far away.
yes, exactly.
So that stuff just doesn't get factored into the equation, and because markets don't price it in, these things don't get the necessary investment that they need, and I guess we don't get that sort of global cooperation because we've got too many self-interested actors, or whether they be nation states or corporations, or that sort of thing. So this is where I guess I buy the Marxian argument for
Yes, because that's the thing. Let's use Project Hail Mary as an example. So it kind of shoehorns the superordinate goal because it's like, hey, it's this is a very visible problem. All the scientists have told us that if we don't solve what's killing the sun into consideration, we're all going to die. So let's let's kiss and make up. Let's push all of the scientists into the same room, get this shit done, find out how to do um, um, interstellar travel, and let's find out what the problem is.
hmm,
And the fact of the matter is, if we take the current system, it superordinate. Like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, leading up to getting man onto the moon, that was a superordinate goal
hmm.
that created the space race between the USSR and the United States of America.
Yeah, but
Obviously, sorry.
yeah, I'll push back on this one. That wasn't existential. Like getting men on the moon wasn't like an existential risk on any level.
Oh, no, okay. Then maybe I shouldn't have framed it like that. But what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say is, at least with previous superordinate goals, it was two superpowers that were
but
trying to outdo each
yeah,
other. They
but
basically were the two. Let's say they were the two. The class president and the I don't know the class vice president that
but
were
see,
that were part of trying to do the same project, and
yeah,
one was trying to do the project better than the other. So you have Gagarin, who was the first for the USSR, who was the first into space, first man into space, and
yeah,
then the USA one-upped the USSR by
someone,
Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, blah blah blah,
yeah.
being the first men on the moon. It was basically, haha, look, I
So
in the space race, I did this better than you. But yeah, go for it.
yeah, let me, because like we talk about how like from the Marxian perspective, markets aren't good at pricing existential risk, or dealing with stuff on that level.
Yeah.
Uh, but when we look at the space race in particular, like to me, what makes it more impressive is that like it's literally just sheer ambition that's
Mm.
really fueling the space race. And one could argue that from a capitalist perspective, like that that intrinsic competitive instinct, desire, which doesn't have anything to do with national security at all, or like you could say sovereign interest, but I mean, it's the moon. It's really like it's Earth interest. Um, but that competitive instinct kind of fueled innovation into technology, which would eventually
Mm.
land us on the moon. So that could be seen as an example of I don't know, capitalism done right. But okay,
Yeah.
I guess it's probably government investment, but you get where I'm going with it, yeah. Like,
Yes, but this also takes us to probably the Marxian interpret, or at least the Marxian lens of the Great Filter,
yeah,
which they would say, and since we've been talking about superordinate goals, let me also use that as a framing. So it's saying, you know, to use what you were saying before. Ultimately, if we are to continue on as a species, there is an expiration date on planet Earth, and eventually we will have to science the shit out of things, where we will have to be an interplanetary spacefarer, and then an interstellar spacefarer,
yeah,
because eventually not only will the Goldilocks zone not exist anymore, but eventually we will have to go that four or so light years away to the next star and set up life again. Now, where a Marxian interpretation is, where I kind of feel like it maps on quite well with the Great Filter, is that it kind of incorporates the pessimistic view as well as the optimist view
mm,
together. And what I mean by that is, well, you kind of mentioned it before, but how things are working in our current, capitalist neoliberal world is things are incredibly short-term focused,
mm,
and capitalism is, at least in its current state, is very good at externalizing costs that, or at least, you know, yeah. No, actually, that's probably a great way
yeah,
to describe it. Externalizing costs, then not considering them for the short term. So, yeah, like climate change is a good example of that. Basically cheap labor by sending it off to the global south.
mm,
The whole idea about fast fashion. It's they're able to sell items for that cheap is because everything is made in China or made in Taiwan, and that sort of thing. So the argument is that because we are just looking at things from financial year to financial year, and if you are looking at a something that is on the scale of something like Project Hail Mary, is it possible that your government that functions via a market system, would it be able to come together in order to eventually solve that sort of super ordinate goal when it's so focused on short term thinking? So, and this brings in as well that because Marx would say, capitalism is always crisis prone. So it has that boom and bust cycle where there's great economic gains, but then great economic depressions that lead to people losing their jobs. Markets crashing, and society going into chaos. Because of that, is that the right environment for you to undergo those sort of superordinate goals? So uh, if you were to map on the Marxian, I guess, a reading of this, it would be that if we keep things as they currently are, they are on the uh, pessimistic side of the pendulum, where maybe we've kind of missed the goal if we're going to
single track.
experience crisis after crisis, especially whether it is the next global financial crisis or it's climate change, that we just simply wouldn't be able to get our shit together, and then society collapses. But where things are much more on the optimistic side of things, if we were to revolutionize the system and be able to focus on those superordinate goals, then maybe we can finally commit to those superordinate goals where making society, making your workplace, making society more democratic in that fashion, where we are working towards those human superordinate goals. Maybe, maybe we can solve space fair.
Hmm.
So, look, obviously, you mentioned before you might want to push back on some of those ideas,
Yeah, yeah.
but I thought at least much more of the traditional ways of how societies rise and fall, and also the boom and bust cycle that we are currently in. It kind of mapped on quite well with,
Yeah.
say, for example, Karl Marx's Capital and that sort of
Like
thing.
I definitely like it has like it makes sense like on an intuitive level like when you describe it that way that you know like if we don't do anything about the current system it will collapse like it can't we can't just keep going as we are like climate change let alone Goldilocks zone changing or any of that if we don't solve climate change we're fucked like it's I don't dispute it on that level. Um, the couple of levels that I do want to like sort of push back on, and firstly, like framing it from the perspective of the Fermi paradox, and whether or not this this type of event constitutes a great filter more universally across us and other alien civilizations, or whether or not this is just our great filter, like this is our sort of hurdle to overcome before we can start to focus on those superordinate goals. And
That's a valid point, to be honest. Like maybe our great filter is can we get out of the rut of focusing on things short term over long term,
but
and
there's
you let's call them uh, the Phoebe race in I don't know 4 light years away. Maybe for them it's something completely different,
entirely
and
possible. Like there's no shortage of challenges as a global civilization that we like as okay not even as a global civilization as representatives of life on earth um, in order for life on earth to stay alive there is no shortage of like challenges that we will need to undergo before we can get anywhere near becoming a spacefaring civilization or a spacefaring species. So
hmm,
what I mean by that is like the types of conditions that actually gave like allowed for the evolution of human beings in the first place, let alone our accumulation of technology and knowledge and wisdom and like the amount that we've evolved over the past few thousand years relative to the millions of years or the hundreds of thousands of years before that like is like we're already on the singularity on some level. But the reason why I mention this is because I think it was 66 million years ago we had that asteroid that hit the earth and wiped out the dinosaurs, which were
hmm.
the dominant race or the apex predators all over the world. Now, if if that asteroid doesn't happen, then human life doesn't evolve on Earth as we know it.
Hmm.
Like we don't wind up in the situation of becoming the dominant species on Earth. It'd still be the dinosaurs. We needed we needed like a catastrophic event of that scale to give the ecosystem a chance to like to wipe out enough of it for the slate to be blank again, and for us to emerge out of all that chaos as as being as intelligent as we are. Um, Now, there's another hypothesis in there that in order for like a truly intelligent creature to emerge, um, you tend not to see these things in apex predators. Apex predators usually aren't going to develop the intelligence necessary to get you off this rock or solve complex problems or anything like that.
Mm.
Because what happens is they get to the top, their food source is secure. There's not a whole lot of evolutionary pressure to adapt, so they just get comfortable where they are. Um, Now, at the lower end of things, when you're prey for everyone, um, basically you're stuck in survival mode the entire time. You can't afford to actually focus for long enough to solve complex problems, evolve, develop culture, society, any of that stuff. So you don't get a chance to develop intelligence. You have to be somewhere in the middle. So humans, we're not an apex predator, but we're not prey either. We can be predators or we can be prey. So we sit somewhere in that middle,
Mm.
which gives rise to this middle niche theory that complex problem solving only emerges in organisms that occupy that middle niche. So they've got pressure from above, but they've
Yeah.
got the opportunity to exploit resources from below. And on top of that, in order to exploit those resources, they have to form social social systems. They have to be able to communicate with one another, work together. This is what gives rise to intelligence, collective intelligence. So intelligence as we know it, like has evolved, not as we know it, but like we're quite confident in saying that we've observed learning abilities in other organisms that are akin to intelligence in, say, octopus,
Mm.
cephalopods.
Mm.
We've observed it in other primates, so gorillas, monkeys, that sort of thing, that we're evolved from. We've observed it in corvids, so like crows and I think ravens and that type of bird. They're incredibly smart creatures.
Mm.
So these are sort of like seen as examples of complex, like organisms that can solve complex problems that occupy that middle niche
Mm.
and explain that sort of theory. The reason why I'm talking about all this is because, like, in order, I don't think that when we put the Marxian perspective on the great filter and the necessity of sort of cooperation and like there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen before we get to that place
Mm.
that represents a filtering out of sorts of the evolutionary process, in and of itself, which has to happen in order for us to even get a chance to fight capitalism or solve global problems or do any of that stuff. So, and again, that stuff has to happen within the the um, the window of intelligence. So let me go back to the dinosaur example
Okay.
for a second, because like what you talked about was the necessity of revolution to prevent system collapse in order for us to be able to solve superordinate goals. Now, system collapse. One could argue that the asteroid hitting the Earth is an example of system collapse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now that system collapse happened to allow new opportunities to emerge from like thinking about it from the global perspective, not
Yeah.
like if you're the dinosaurs, that's absolutely catastrophic. We went extinct. Like
Mm.
that's what happens if it's not like the dinosaurs had an opportunity for revolution, like or to work together to prevent the asteroids
Yeah.
from hitting. Like they just had to deal with systemic collapse. But from their perspective, like that's horrible what happened to them. From our perspective, it's the best shit since sliced bread. Like we couldn't have
Yeah.
asked
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
for a better deal. So are we now in the position of the dinosaurs, where we're just thinking about it from our perspective, rather than thinking about, hang on, like could our civilizational collapse theoretically give rise to something better? We don't really pause and sort of ask that question. Like it's not. I'm not sort of advocating for like people to die or global extinction or anything like that. But my argument is, we talk about the necessity of revolution to in terms of preventing system collapse. I actually,
And
hey,
and and, re-
tell
and
me, you
yeah.
give me your take on this. Like,
Yeah.
does revolution prevent system collapse, or is revolution system collapse?
Look, it really depends on who you ask, because really, let's even use the broad definition of revolution. Like a revolution can be just as simple as you revolutionizing your constitution, where you have new rights, and also you change the direction of how your society and culture functions. So, say for example, you amend your constitution to say that your country now is going to have digital rights. So you can't have people exploit their digital twin online. Like
Mm,
that is a very, if you were to enshrine that in your constitution and have those sort of rights, that is incredibly revolutionary. Sure, there's probably the other side of the pendulum, which is much more of an accelerationist view of revolution, where it's, hey, let's bring about the collapse of the system as fast as possible so we can rule over the ashes.
mm,
But it really depends on the speaker and what their view on revolution is. I guess the Marxian view, or at least the Marxist lens I was trying to use before, is get out of that short term thinking, get out of that marketplace thinkings, because that's the thing. Like, hey, look, I'm an accountant for work, and there's a very established accounting standards that you function via a going concern with the business. You function via a financial year. So your profit and loss, or your balance sheet, is based on how well you perform in that 365 days.
mm,
If you structure society like that, especially if you're trying to solve, 100-year problems like climate change.
yeah,
Like if,
yeah,
if you're if you're focusing on productivity and line go up, rather than, hey, we're flooding the earth with greenhouse gases, and we seem to be just producing more things because companies want us to produce more things. Is that actually viable for the limited resources that are on our planet? And hey, looking at uh, the balance sheet and the profit and loss, is that taking into consideration all the emissions that you are producing? Like obviously, uh, carbon accounting and all of that exists,
mm,
but is that enough to for us to slow down where we hit those 2030 targets, that we hit those 2050 targets? I don't know until we change our thinking to the much more superordinate goals. Like, obviously, I was speaking in incredibly vague terms, but I think it's a valid point to think, are we thinking short term, or are we thinking long term? Are we thinking about our profit and loss, or are we thinking about the superordinate goals? And I feel like that's very relevant with where we are right now. Like, sure, you could be right that for all we know, we can't. We're stuck in our ways, and we won't change. And again, that's the much more pessimistic view of the Great Filter. And you know, in the ashes of human society, something else appears and is able to seafare and whatnot. But I'd like to think we'd be able to change our ways and get through
Me
that
too.
great filter, and it is in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Look, I'm on your wavelength like entirely. Like I would much rather for us to be able to overcome these these global challenges and actually find a way to work together. So I'm not opposed to that on any level.
Hmm.
I guess I guess my frame of thinking was more so around um, extrapolating the great filter to like outside of our own lens, um, and to sort of broader alien civilizations. Um, Again, I mean, hey, we have no idea what intelligence could look like. When it comes
Hmm.
to alien civilizations, we have no idea whether or not they'll be dealing with the same kinds of problems. Um, it's possible, and I was listening to a bit about this in that paper you sent through on anarchy, technology, and self destruct, where it was talking about how um, well, one of the things that makes the great filter potentially inevitable from a social perspective is that um, technology, any time we acquire powerful technologies that could do amazing things for civilization, an equally destructive technology gets unlocked at the same time. So, say for
Hmm.
example, splitting the atom. Um, when it came to splitting the atom,
Yep.
that could be a source of energy, but it also could be used for incredible destruction, a nuclear bomb as well. And
Yep.
and, and typically, what happens is, um, or another example is, we could develop um, genetic treatments to cure all human disease or all disease on this planet. But the capability to be able to do that also unlocks, you could create deadly viruses that wipe out everything as well. So
Hmm.
there's usually some type of corresponding destructive and constructive gain, and that the ability to manage technology from a social perspective in terms of the power dynamics, the concentration of power, who gets access to the technology, nefarious actors, um, how that entire system plays out, is that our technology evolves at a rate faster than our ability to coordinate politically does. So
Hmm.
technology sort of follows this I guess um, exponential curve. When you look at it on the broader scale, um, whereas our ability to coordinate is linear at best, if not experiencing some serious challenges on a regular basis.
Hmm.
That limit our ability to be able to govern these technologies or even agree on um, how to, like, well, I mean, we're struggling with that with AI at the moment. We can't
Yeah.
get, we can't get agreement on exactly how we're going to regulate AI. And, um, I was listening to how the opportunity for nuclear disarmament um, slipped through our fingers and led to the Cold War. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. It came out of the podcast, but it was talking about how the US was prepared to disarm their nuclear arsenal and submit to like a world authority that governed all nuclear energy or anything to do with nuclear. And they wanted the entire world to sign up on it. when they were the only ones that had it. And apparently, the Soviet Union said, no, we want you to disarm first, and then we'll sign up to this plan that you've got, which didn't work for the US. So they didn't want to disarm themselves when there was no guarantee that Soviet Union wasn't going to disarm. So that led to, at least my understanding is that's what led to the Cold War and the
Mm.
proliferation of nuclear armament across how many different countries now. So
Yeah.
like that opportunity for regulation was there, and it slipped through our fingers. Um, and I don't think we've ever sort of had that opportunity, from an AI perspective. But like these are the challenges of coordinating the power dynamics around powerful technologies. And dealing with the consequences of both concentration of power, and who gets access to it, and how nefarious actors are involved, and protection of sovereign interests, and competitive instincts, and it's a whole minefield to navigate. So I don't. I don't want to discount, that these are all incredibly difficult challenges for humanity to have to solve, from a social perspective, that constitute a type of great filter for us, before we're even starting to think about interplanetary travel or interstellar travel. We got to
Mm.
solve that stuff, that climate change stuff, like much closer to home first before we can focus on that other stuff. But the mistake that I don't want to make is, assuming that our challenges are going to be the same challenges that any other alien civilization is going to face. Because it could look completely different to what we're used to, from an intelligence perspective, from a technology perspective, from an evolutionary perspective. There are so many different things that could be variables that we just haven't accounted for at all before we can start making broad claims around exactly what the great filter is and
Yeah.
how it affects.
Well, just to kind of use an example, because I totally get where you're coming from, that it would be incredibly arrogant to assume that because there is intelligent life out there and it ends up um, conf- confirming, like let's just assume that we end up being spacefaring folk, and we manage to make alien contact, and we kicked all the goals, we crushed those superordinate goals in order to be where we are, and we make first contact with the aliens. It would be incredibly arrogant to assume that the Phoebe people that live on the star 4 light years away compared to us, their journey was exactly the same, and
Mm,
they must be similar to us. It would be incredibly arrogant to think
I
that.
agree.
And what makes me think, as an example as well, that all of that medieval art about about Jesus or any of the kind of religious figures, and just obviously bias exists. I totally get that the uh, the European artists at the time were recreating
Yeah,
Christ and all of that in the image that they knew of, which
yeah.
was him as a
White
white
man
man,
with
despite being a
a beard. Yeah,
Palestinian. Like
yeah.
I'm sure it makes sense that they were making him in their own image, but that obviously wasn't the reality of this
Nothing like
scenario.
what he actually would have looked like. Yeah.
Yeah, so to assume that uh, the uh, the alien life form had exactly the same journey of us would
Mm,
be incredibly arrogant.
mm, mm. So, and I guess the other part that I really want to get people thinking outside the box of is fair enough, you know, like the interplanetary and interstellar thing is difficult. Um, technology alone, really, the things that sort of separate us on a technological level, you know, is our ability to learn, to use tools to manipulate our environment, and be able to record how we use those tools to manipulate our environment. So, fire, for example, communication, initially by words and language, and then by writing. So what happens is, like, technology is the accumulation of wisdom that expands beyond an individual's lifetime. So take an octopus, for example. Octopus can learn to do some incredibly difficult shit. Like, they can learn to escape enclosures from humans. They can learn to open bottles and solve complex challenges and stuff.
Mm-mm-mm.
They live solitary lives, and they're apparently not very social, and and they don't have any means of sort of recording what they've learned and passing it on to the next generation. Now,
Mm.
the moment you've solved that challenge, you get access to cumulative wisdom. Now,
Mm.
from a human perspective, once we unlocked cumulative wisdom, I now have access to, through the internet and through AI, the totality of, or almost the totality of, all human wisdom that's come before me. Yeah, I can look it up
Mm.
online if I've got questions. I can leverage it. I can use it to solve problems. I can use it to come up with new ideas. I can build on top of it. Now, the first humans didn't have that opportunity. They were sort of pioneering. But every subsequent generation of humans gets to build on top of what came before us. Now, the only reason why, you know, crows or ravens or octopus or other, gorillas and monkeys haven't taken over the world, is because they haven't learned how to pass on that written wisdom to subsequent generations. That's really the only thing that
Mm.
separates us from our use of technology and our mastery of our environment versus the other organisms. It's not it's not actually a matter of raw intelligence. It's the externalization of cognition through, like, the simple act of being able to write. Like, that simple act of being able to put something from your head down onto paper means you no longer have to carry it in memory permanently. You can come back to it later, and that's it's almost like an extension of your mind. Like, the simple ability to write increases your access to intelligence.
Mm.
It increases your access to other people's intelligence. So, these are things that we take for granted, that that almost constitute, the sole basis of our difference between what makes us human versus what makes us just another species on Earth. And the reason why I'm going down this route is because when you think about it from an ecosystem perspective, there are types of intelligence within the ecosystem that don't look anything like what we think of when we think of as intelligence. So, take for
Mm.
example, slime molds. Um, have you heard about the famous experiment where a slime mold was trying to work, like, they've got to figure out how to shuttle nutrients from different parts of a network, to like where it needs to go, basically.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
they set up an experiment where I think it was like a Tokyo situation where they've got certain number of people here, certain number of people here, and they just use nutrients to represent the people, and the slime mold
Mm.
has to basically connect in a way that figures out what is the optimal distribution of nutrients across this entire network. That's how it has to grow into the space. And
Mm.
what the slime mold actually did, this is what's incredible about it, was I think it recreated the actual subway system
Oh, right.
that's used in Japan that represents the optimal distribution of people across those pathways. So like it did that independently.
Oh,
Now
right.
that we don't think of a slime mold as being intelligent. You know, that's that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
that's not typically what we think of. When you think about like fungal networks that connect entire forests worth of trees, and allow what's going on in one section of the forest in terms of nutrient depletion or something, to send electrical signals kilometers away within the same forest through that fungal network. They've been able to detect those signals. Like being able to communicate on that scale,
Mm.
and function within an ecosystem, like is a different form of intelligence from what we're typically sort of used to. Um,
Mm.
I guess when you think about like bees and collective intelligence,
Mm.
how do all bees get on the same page and protect the queen bee, and how do all ants get on the same page and build ant mounds
Mm.
and termite mounds, and like these are feats of collective collective intelligence that humans don't really have access to. Like
Mm.
you can't get humans functioning on the same level of synchronicity as bees do. We
Mm.
can't coordinate on that level, but bees are able to. It's you know like there are organisms that are doing things that are far beyond our own capabilities, but we
Mm.
don't think of them as intelligent at all. When really it's just a different type of intelligence that's being demonstrated, and it's
Mm.
entirely possible that when it comes to alien intelligence, we might see something completely different as well. So
Yeah.
we've got to start thinking from that evolutionary perspective, which is far more likely what we're going to come across, than starting to think about aliens in terms of two hands, two legs, a brain.
Yeah, yeah.
How are
No.
you? You know, spaceship. Like,
Mm. No, no, no. I fully get where you're coming from, but yeah, it's. I felt like today has been a very interesting conversation,
hmm,
and um, of course, as always, Kareem, the last segment of this podcast is what's that survey by? So, what do you reckon the prompt for this one was?
just before this, I spent so long staring at your little box on the screen that for the pretty much the entirety of the episode, I don't actually focus on what you're sharing on the screen, and
Okay.
somehow I can consistently manage to make it to the end of the episode without ever having asked the question, "What am I actually looking at on the screen?" This, this happens to me all the time. So, and then by the time you ask me the question, I'm like, oh, wait, what? Something on the screen? Shit.
Well, take a wild guess. What do you reckon this one was?
All right, give me a moment.
Okay.
Um, um, so those rings look like some type of gate that we have to cross through, like a filter,
Hmm.
um, a filter towards a better future. No, and that hand raising looks like a revolutionary sign.
Okay.
Am I wrong about that, or how am I
Okay.
going? Oh no, hang
Yeah.
on. There's
Yeah.
like doom on the left, and there's all green stuff on the right.
Okay.
So we're differentiating between the okay. Will we will the revolution come in time before the collapse, or will we actually be able to save the system?
Look,
And,
it's a solid attempt. So the prompt for this one was is that the cosmos is quiet not because life doesn't exist, but because systems fail to sustain themselves. Overcoming the great filter will lead to an ecological and revolutionary society in space and beyond.
okay, nice. I love how much detail you're putting into these prompts as well. What's yeah, like
I'll be completely honest. That first part, the cosmos is quiet not because life doesn't exist, but because systems fail to sustain themselves. That's actually, um, look. I must be at the stage with my AI chatbot that it knows that I sometimes use it for synthwave art, where
yeah.
it even did the prompt. It even did the prompts where it's like, "Hey, if you were thinking for future."
Oh,
Synthwave
so it
prompt
gave you the
ideas.
prompt without you asking for it.
Well, it gave me half the prompt, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, yeah. So like that,
Uh,
that's awesome. Like um, this is like because I do this all the time with AI. Is I call it meta prompting. Basically,
yeah.
I don't actually write the prompt for an image prompt. I say, hey, I'm thinking about this image. Can you write me the prompt, and then I'll give the prompt back to you, and you make the image. So, like because the
Mhm.
prompt that it'll generate for me is far more detailed than anything I can come up with myself. Like you can do that poetic stuff and see what comes out, but usually what happens is if you're far more specific about exactly what you're going for, you can tend to get better results out of it if you're going for particular stylistic themes or objects. Or but in your case, I mean, I love these what was the prompt segments at the end of the show because as much as I ignore it for the entirety of the show, getting to the end of it, I get to see like creativity on display and have a think about, oh, look, how does a prompt actually translate into this image, you know? So
Actually, that meta prompting that you just mentioned, just to kind of call back a previous episode that we've done, I've done that for any of the NPCs as well as your characters for D&D. I've done
yeah,
that. What I've done is this is a description of Blort, or this is a description of Neve as a as an elf druid. This is everything you know about her. Describe her appearance and temperament and all of that, and then it gives me that block of text as to what it thinks they look like, and then I feed it back into it, and I'm like, create a fantasy art about this, and then bang,
yeah, yeah. That's mad. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So we're gonna start. Yeah, like that's one of my major messages around how AI use has to evolve, or how our thinking about AI use has to evolve is not in terms of I give you this, you give me this, transaction over. No, we're going to start thinking in terms of that back and forth between the AI,
Mhm.
that planning at multiple steps ahead, because this is what unlocks like true intelligence. And
Yeah,
I was going to go into this around like cognitive exoskeletons and how like the evolution of intelligence and brain size. Anyway, not important, but when you start thinking on that level around, okay, I'm going to take this first step, but really what I'm
Mm.
after is this fourth step. Can I direct the interaction between us in such a way that we go back and forth until eventually I get that fourth or fifth step that I'm after?
Mm.
And then eventually, when we get really good at it, we'll start thinking 10 steps ahead,
Mm. Mm.
day ahead. Okay, what am I trying to get to in a day's time? How do I have to direct the interaction now to,
Yeah.
to, to make the most of your intelligence towards, like, say, if you were creating like a video, an AI video or AI sequence of videos, could you lay out a storyboard first, get it to generate the prompts for the individual videos, get it to feed those video prompts back in, sequence the videos together, cut them together. Like, do you see where I'm going with the
Yeah, 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 definitely.
yeah?
And we've had a very good talk today, and yeah, a bit of a tangent there near the end of things,
Sorry,
but
sorry. I don't
that's all right. But if you have stuff with us all the way through, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and remember to keep thinking and keep learning, and remember, thank you for joining us today and tonight, and hope you have a good one.